taught him how to hit a baseball.
Just like that. Say hi!
How to hit a receiver. The strike zone. The net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Well, now we know Donald Trump's idea of fun. It's to beat up on a CNN reporter. What do you say? Hey, hello, everybody, on a Monday, July 3rd. Yeah, here we are in between the long 4th of July weekend and the 4th of July. We got this day to celebrate together, to talk together, to cover the news of the day together. And it's good to be back with all of you after a little break last week. I actually want to say a big thank you to Peter Ogburn and to Igor Volsky and to Sabrina Siddiqui, right?
It takes a village.
For keeping the good ship Bill Press afloat here last week. Good to see you all. Hope you are having a great break as part of the celebration of the 4th of July. We welcome you to the program. And the next 2 hours will bring you up to date on all the latest news of the day. Republicans, as you know, you covered this last week, came up short. Mitch McConnell's big plan went belly up, and he had to say, oops, we don't have the votes. We're not going to vote this week on that health care bill. We're going to do it after we come back from the 4th of July recess. And now, believe it or not, they are talking about something they said they would never, never, never do, which is just repeal Obamacare and leave everybody high and dry with no replacement plan. That is what they are talking about, which would be a monumental disaster. Yes, Donald Trump, how low can he go? We haven't seen the end of it yet, obviously, after last week's tweets about Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, particularly about Mika, and the video released over the weekend. We'll talk about beating up a TV reporter, and Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump set to meet this week. Will Donald Trump say anything about how dare you try to hack our elections? Lots to talk about. We'll get right to it. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Yes, indeed. Just a couple of other stories making news just in time for the 4th of July. Old rocker Neil Young has released a new album. Now, it's interesting because he timed it for the 4th of July, and it is a resistance album, as he points out. Somebody needed to sort of capture the voice of the resistance, and he thinks he's the guy to do it. He released a new song called Children of Destiny. He teamed up with the band Promise of the Real, which is a rock band featuring Willie Nelson's two sons in the band, and a 62-piece orchestra.
Whoa.
Should be noted that Neil Young is Canadian. And so for the 4th of July,
I don't see him as the voice of the resistance either, somehow.
No, not really. Maybe a different resistance a long time ago, but
I don't think I'm going to listen to that.
Not anymore. Tesla, everybody's been waiting for when Tesla is going to unveil their Model 3 car. Well, Elon Musk made the announcement just a little while ago, actually, on Twitter this morning. He said that the Tesla is going to go on sale Friday. This Friday.
You mean this new 3 or
the new Model 3? Yeah, the car is going to start around $35,000, and then you get a $7,500 federal electric car tax credit. So, at the end of the day, it could cost $27,500, which is not bad considering you got an electric car at the end of the transaction. The 5-seat car will be able to go 215 miles on a single charge and will accelerate going 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds.
You know, I would buy one of them in a flash.
Yeah.
First, I think the Tesla is certainly the most beautiful cars on the road today.
Sure.
They're really cool cars. And they have those doors that lift up like this.
Yeah.
Which I
sure.
love. They're really cool.
Yeah.
And, but, we don't have we park on the street. I live in the city. No place I can charge it.
You're finding more and more charging stations, but they're not.
No,
they're not
no,
everywhere
no.
like they need to be.
Yeah, right. So, but if I had a garage,
Yeah.
or if I had a carport,
Yeah.
I live in this. You bet. I'd
Just
have one.
imagine where we'd be today if we had stuck with the electric car trend that we started in the 80s. You know? I mean, we'd
No, I know.
have ports everywhere.
And this one is a beautiful machine. It really is. So. Good for Tesla.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Well, what do you know? It's Monday, July 3rd. How about it? Great to see you today, and we thank you for welcoming us as part of your extended 4th of July weekend. Not everybody's lucky enough to have the whole week off or even the long weekend off. But if you do, good for you. And if you don't, or if you do, either way, thank you for joining us here on this Monday, July 3rd. It's good to be back with you. Sorry, I was...
Welcome back.
Well, thank you. I was out for a few days. I had a little facelift, actually. I'm still bleeding.
I can see you're bleeding everywhere.
You can still see I'm bleeding everywhere. But, but
God.
doesn't stop me, man. I come to work.
Good for you.
Bleeding from all orifices, as Donald Trump would say. What a disgusting human being. I got to tell you. And that's where we start. I guess you got to start. I mean, the latest. Actually, we don't start with the bleeding video because that has now been surpassed by yet another by those tweets rather. That's been surpassed by another tweet, which is in the form of a video that Donald Trump retweeted. Of course, you've heard about it. This is the replay of an old WWE video. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, right? Where Donald Trump on The Apprentice does this fake wrestling bout or
this was
battle.
actually part of. I don't watch wrestling, so Jamie, you'll have to help me out
WWE
here.
SmackDown, right?
But I think this was on like at WrestleMania or SmackDown or something.
Right.
Yeah, SmackDown.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So he actually showed up on a WWE event and
several,
wrestled.
several times.
Yeah.
And this one time he's walking alongside the ring. He's in this phony spat that they just put up with Vincent McMahon, I guess, who's the head of WWE, or his wife was. I don't know. What a bunch of sleazeballs at any rate. Of course, Donald Trump was one of them. He's walking alongside the ring. He knocks a guy down and then pummels him on the ground. Well, they, on Reddit, they put it up a couple of weeks ago. Somebody did actually, and put the logo of CNN on the face of the guy. So it's now a CNN reporter. The same thing. Donald Trump walks up to him, cold cocks him, and then gets down on the ground and starts pummeling him. And this is Donald Trump's idea of how to be funny, of just taking his war against the media to another level, and to that question about how low can he go before the world just turns against him, before those cowardly Republicans in the Senate turn against him. I think the answer is there is nothing he could do that would, number one, alienate his supporters, two, alienate those wake up the Republicans, cowardly Republicans in Congress, or three, knock some sense into the White House staff who still blindly support him. I mean, he could, as he himself said pretty clearly, go out on Fifth Avenue in New York and shoot somebody, and his supporters would still love him, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders would still kiss his ass, as she does every day. It is so disgusting. You look at that video, it's not funny at all. It's disgusting. It's juvenile. It's dangerous because it does incite people to violence, just like he did during the campaign. Oh, this is the this is the real prize. Last Thursday, now this is after the Mika tweets about the facelift and the bleeding, but before even the violence, the CNN video comes out, Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the briefing, a rare briefing on camera last week, says, oh, no, Donald Trump is such a peaceful, loving man.
The president in no way, form, or fashion has ever promoted or encouraged violence. If anything, quite the contrary. And he was simply pushing back and defending himself.
Wait, well, how dumb does she think we are, right?
Clearly they think that we're pretty stupid.
We remember Donald Trump out in Salt Lake City who said at a rally when he was a candidate, and he did this several times, but that one time in Salt Lake City where he said, I wish I could punch him out. I'd like to punch him out. He also said, if you see anybody in a rally in this rally who's not behaving as you don't think they are, just knock him out. Just punch him out.
He pined for the old days of when people who interrupted would get carried out on a stretcher. That's
right.
a quote.
I remember the old days, right. That was good, right? Now the cops aren't tough enough. They don't beat the crap out of them. No, he was never once condemned any violence at his rally. And then he comes out with this video, totally inappropriate. And you know what I think all Americans ought to recognize is it just demeans the office of the President of the United States. I mean, to have a president using that kind of language and showing that kind of behavior, it's just, is this really, what do people around the world think? I know what the people around the world think. They think we're putzes for electing this guy, and that we're even bigger putzes for leaving him in office and not doing anything about it. And, again, the fact that the White House staff would defend him, I don't get it. At some point, you have to stand for something. At some point, you have to have principles. At some point, you have to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to debase myself to suggest that what this guy, who happens to be my boss, is doing is right. It's wrong. I cannot tolerate it. I'm out of here. Anybody with any self-respect would have quit the Trump White House.
So here's just to look at this uncritically, right? Because there are some people out there who are just saying, oh, this is just the president blowing off steam. He's having fun. This is the president who likes to think that he's a funny guy, right? Because Trump does think that he's a funny guy. And sort of just poking fun at the media, right? And then there are other people who say, well, this is like a call to violence. And some people can see this as a call to violence. And if I'm a Trump supporter, right, I could see what Trump is trying to say, right? Just being uncritical. But here's to me the bigger issue is that this is what he's thinking about, right? Barack Obama took a lot of flack from a lot of people. George W. Bush took a lot of flack from a lot of people. Presidents will always take a lot of flack from a lot of people. And the difference is you sort of have to rise above that because you've got bigger fish to fry. The last thing you could be concerned about are petty fights with what you perceive to be a media that attacks you.
No, but you don't understand. Donald Trump is a petty person, and Donald Trump has zero capacity for content, for substance, or zero interest.
And that's the actual problem.
Yes.
I think.
It is that combined with the fact that he is a mean, low-life, unhinged, unbalanced individual.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
Yeah. But so we come back to this. So the White House staff, for sure. I mean, there's some of them are quoted this morning as saying, "Oh, we thought this was when we saw it, we thought this was really funny. Ha ha! What a great sense of humor Donald Trump has." And then there are the Republicans in Congress. What a cowardly! I mean, look, how can they believe this is good for the country? How can they believe this is good for their party? How could they believe this is good for their agenda? I mean, it's time for them to stand up and say, no, no, no. And a couple of them did, but those are rare voices. We had a couple of them yesterday. Ben Sass. No, I'm sorry. But Ben Sass did come out and say that.
There's an important distinction to draw between bad stories or crappy coverage and the right that citizens have to argue about that and complain about that, and trying to weaponize distrust. The First Amendment is the beating heart of the American experiment, and you don't get to separate the freedoms that are in there.
Yeah, right. And somebody ought to tell Donald Trump that. And then he has this guy, I never saw him before. So he trots out a Homeland Security advisor, Thomas Bossert, right, on ABC's This Week yesterday. He sees the video for the first time. Martha Raddatz, filling in for George Stephanopoulos, plays the video. And, I'm so proud of my boss.
I'm pretty proud of the president for developing a Twitter and a social media platform where he can talk directly to the American people.
Oh, yeah. He's got this tweet, as Donald Trump says, this is what a modern day president looks like, right? God. A pig. A disgusting, sexist pig. This is what a modern day president looks like. Of course, he's got a right to do it. That's not the question. People are saying that we're trying to shut down his First Amendment rights. No, the media is not doing that. Democrats are not doing that. We're just saying there's a certain dignity and decorum that goes, by the way, with any of us, but for sure with the president of the United States. As Peter said, he ought to be above that. You know the best way to respond to criticism from the media? Ignore it. Respond in content.
If we are in such a bad shape, as he likes to say constantly, that we are, a broken country with all kinds of problems and crime and violence and economy problems, which are all BS. But if that is your argument, go work on that.
Yeah, right.
Go fix that.
And then Tom Price, a member of his cabinet. I mean, again, who are these people? They have no self-respect at all. So good for Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. Of course, how can you not ask him about this when this is remember, Sean Spicer told us presidential tweets are official presidential statements, right? We have to consider them. And Chuck Todd asked Tom Price about it. And Tom Price said, oh, how dare you ask me about that?
This is really remarkable. You got incredible challenges across this nation, incredible challenges around the world. The challenge that I've been given is to address the health care issues. And your program, a program with the incredible history of Meet the Press, and that's what you want to talk about? Let me just suggest to you that the American people want to talk about the challenges. Let me just suggest to you that the American people...
Go for it.
Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, you're blaming me for what the President of the United States has spent his entire week focused on?
Exactly. No. Yeah, right. Do you think Trump was talking about health care? No, he's talking about he spent last week attacking Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski because they dared criticize him, and now with this latest thing with CNN. But what part of this is also, I think it's important to put this in focus. Is this latest one is this attack on CNN. But that's just one network. That's just part of his entire war on the media. I mean, Donald Trump really does believe that the role of the media is to kiss his ass.
Yeah.
And to talk about how great he is. George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, forget about it. Donald Trump is the greatest president ever, who has accomplished more in 160 days or whatever it is by now than any other president in history. I mean, he wants the media to lie and to fawn all over him. You know what? That's not the way it works. Yeah, the media has an important role in this country, right? And we're not perfect, but the media's role is to ask tough questions and to tell the truth. And sometimes, you know what? That's not going to come out right. The politician's not going to like it. Democrat or Republican. Barack Obama had his media critics, God knows, right? So did every single president, going all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. But remember what Thomas Jefferson said. Thomas Jefferson said, were it left for me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I would not hesitate one moment to prefer the latter. That's Thomas Jefferson. Now, where's Donald Trump is so far away from that, And so what he's trying to do, and he does it at every time. He comes down to this, by the way, this phony faith valley. rally Saturday here in Washington, I want to know, here's what I want to know. I want to know what faith these people belong to, that they give Donald Trump a standing ovation when he does this childish thing about, they tried to stop me, but I'm president and they're not, right? Donald Trump at this rally on Saturday. Got right?
The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
What a leader. What a great leader.
Oh, how childish,
Jesus.
Right? You know what? They just sort of said, oh, get out of here, right? To show how he was just fawning all over these fake faith people. Again, I want to know what faith they subscribe to. They have no principles, no morality, no faith whatsoever. If they're saluting and embracing, these faith leaders are embracing the serial adulterer, violent-prone, disgusting language human being who's the president of the United States, and he's their leader.
Pick, just look at last week. Pick anything, right?
Right. And,
you
and
don't
tell me this is what my faith says, this is the way we should behave.
He called Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. He called him low IQ, called her dumb as a rock.
Called him psycho.
Called him psycho.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just the name calling alone, regardless of who it is that he's talking about, that should be alone to get you annoyed as a Christian or as a person of faith.
Yeah. When you leave the church on Sunday, God forbid that that's the message you got from your preacher, that you should go out and call anybody, right? Whatever happened to love your enemies? He is so far from Jesus Christ, it's just it's unfathomable.
But he balanced it with this.
We're going to start saying Merry Christmas again.
Oh, yeah, right.
Happy Christmas in July, ladies and gentlemen.
But also, that line, and listen to the applause.
God.
You know, these are the idiots who watched Bill O'Reilly, who believe that we were not allowed to say Merry Christmas.
Oh, my
it's
God.
It's just disgusting. Jesus, where do these people come from? But I got to tell you, part of the job of the media is to be critical of politicians, Republican and Democrat. It's not personal. It goes along with the job. And just even Richard Nixon, who probably among all of our presidents is the closest to Donald Trump in feeling beleaguered by the media. I mean, Nixon didn't lash out publicly and personally against people that way. This guy is really sick. And think about it again. What if Barack Obama had acted this way about Fox News or anybody critical of him, or the New York Times critical of him? What if Hillary Clinton had done this, either as Secretary of State or as president or as presidential candidate? I mean, imagine the outcries, right? But with Donald Trump, again, these Republicans, these chicken-s, you-know-what, Republicans in the United States Senate will not stand up against him because, and I at the top of the list, it's got to be Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. They're the leaders of the party in the Congress, and their silence is deafening on this whole issue.
By the way, one quick tweet on this. We got a couple of tweets.
Please,
we have time for a couple here. Liberal Texas Dem found us on Twitter, where we're tweeting at BP Show. The media is facing consequences of giving Trump a pass during the election. I don't disagree with that at all.
That is right on. Absolutely. If anything, that's the irony of his war against the media.
Yeah, they made him.
If anything, he would not be there without the media, who gave him a free pass. And I'll say this, too. He would not be without CNN.
That's true. I agree with that 100%.
CNN not only gave him unlimited coverage, they also put on their air more Trumpers than any other network.
And still do, by the way.
And still do.
Another tweet from KG says Trump's antics against CNN are dangerous because they make his followers further doubt the news media. And one other quick tweet.
Amen to that, too.
Yeah, one other quick on the religious leaders. Celeste Holmes says Trump exposes to the world the religious, quote, leaders who embrace him for the cons and charlatans that they are.
Totally. Anybody, and I say that Jerry Falwell Jr., Billy Graham's son, whatever, Franklin Graham.
Yeah.
Ralph Reed, any of these so-called Christians who stand up and embrace Donald Trump, they ought to be thrown out of the Christianity if there were such a way to. I mean, seriously, they are betraying their faith, and they're betraying everything that Jesus Christ and the gospel stand for.
And there's a comparison
100%.
to make. There's a comparison to make here between the religious and the media, in that stop cozying up to Donald Trump because he hates you. He doesn't like these religious, but he's not a religious man. Look at how he lives his life. There's nothing religious about what he does. And look at the fact that they are showing up in droves. They are the most loyal base for him. And then you look at the media, and they continue to, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. MSNBC is putting more and more conservatives on the air. CNN pays guys like Jason Miller, Corey Lewandowski to go on and say just garbage straight from Trump's mouth. Stop it. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, because you're never gonna look. CNN even, and I think they overreacted, but they got a story wrong. They apologized, they admitted it, and they fired three people for making the mistake. So, but you know what? It's not going to work. If anything, it'll simply backfire. Just one final note on this whole tweet and the violent video is. Even more Democrats over the weekend signed on to the legislation that is sponsored by Jamie Raskins from Maryland to kick off a new commission to study Donald Trump, to ascertain whether Donald Trump is in fact mentally incapacitated, therefore incapable of governing, and that would trigger the 25th Amendment, which has never been used yet. It was adopted in 1967. They were thinking about using it for Ronald Reagan. They didn't. But there are now, I think, some 25 sponsors in the House.
There are 25. Yes, indeed.
So that's picked up a little steam. Those sponsors include the great John Conyers from the state of Michigan, who has the longtime chairman of the House Judiciary Committee when Democrats were in control. I think he's now the ranking member of Judiciary. Sheila Jackson Lee, Eleanor Holmes Norton here, our delegate in Washington, Congressman Anthony Brown from Maryland, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, former chair of the DNC, and I want to be careful here, but I think our friend Jackie Spear from California is one of the sponsors too. At any rate, there's a good collection of people there, and the numbers are growing the more Donald Trump proves to the world that he is, in fact, mentally incapacitated.
I think the best tweet about this is kind of started with Norm Eisen, who helped found Crew. He said after Donald Trump sent out that tweet of him body slamming the CNN logo, which is a real thing that I just said.
Yeah.
This tweet is evidence of mental deterioration. The president needs a psych evaluation. I mean that seriously and literally. I agree. I mean, I've been saying that the whole time.
And there is this thing called the Goldwater Amendment. No, yeah, right, where the American Psychiatric Association said none of their members, they have this pledge now, none of their members will ever publicly comment on the mental illness or mental health of a presidential candidate or a president. They will not opine publicly. No licensed psychologist will do that. They are now considering changing that policy. It was adopted when some people said Barry Goldwater was crazy. Barry Goldwater is so freaking sane compared to Donald Trump. Yeah.
Think of the craziest politician you've ever seen in your lifetime, and Donald Trump beats that by a mile.
Total. Right. So the American Psychiatric Association may change that policy and allow their members to say publicly what Norm Eisen said. We got to get into this a little bit. We got to mention that. I wish you had more time. If anybody gets the Bozo Prize for the weekend, it's Chris Christie. Chris Christie, who's in this little spat with the legislature over the budget, because he's trying to get, I think it's the American, one of the big healthcare companies. He's trying to get them to pump in millions of dollars for the opioid crisis in New Jersey. And he may be right, he may be wrong, but he's wrong. in the way he reacted, in a little petulant little move, he shut down the government over the weekend, which included shutting down all state parks. This is 4th of July weekend, and public beaches in New Jersey on the 4th of July weekend. I think it was just this one great big public beach, not all the beaches at any rate. But who went to the beach yesterday? Chris Christie himself with his family. They are all camped out on the beach, soaking up the sun with nobody around for miles. And
it's insane.
It is at a New Jersey newspaper, hired a plane, flew over the beach, and got a great shot of Chris Christie, fat as a beached whale, sitting there in his beach chair. And then he had the audacity. So he goes to the beach when nobody else is allowed at the beach. He was asked about it, and he said, I'm the governor. I have a house at the beach. If you want a house at the beach, you run for governor, you can have a house at the beach. You can go to the beach anytime you want. What an arrogance. I can't believe it. And then he said, but I went to the beach, but I didn't get any sun. After the plane flies over and we see Chris Christie there in his beach chair surrounded by his family, one of his staffers had to come out again with his tail between his legs and say, oh, no, he actually didn't get any sun. Did you notice he's wearing a baseball cap?
That's a real statement that his press person put out. That's remarkable.
Again, this is why I could never be a press secretary.
Yeah, right.
I could never do that.
No.
I would just say,
There's
right?
no way.
Wait, you really want me to go out and tell reporters that you were on the beach and you didn't get any sun because you were wearing a baseball cap? No, I'm not going to do that. Fire me. I'm not going to do that.
I got to say, this is a great farewell tour for Chris Christie.
Oh,
he
yes.
gives no F's.
It's a great. I mean, it's a great reminder that he's actually still governor. I kind of forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is like
so his approval rating, which is I think has been like at 12%. It's probably down to around 6 now.
Gotta be. This is the Trumpiest thing ever, by the way. Like, this is the perfect little scandal for the era of Trump. Like, nobody can go to this beach. Nobody can go. It's inside of a state park. And so Chris Christie didn't even bother trying to defend this. This is his statement, which you hinted at, but this is his exact statement. Quote, someone said, why should you be allowed to visit when it's closed to everybody else? He says, quote, that's because the governor has a residence at Island Beach. Others don't. That's just the way it goes. Run for governor, and then you can have the residence if you don't like it.
Oh, yeah. Let them eat cake.
It's exactly what it is.
It is. Marie Antoinette
Dope
Christie. By the way, something else very, very important happened. A real blow for liberty as far as I'm concerned, and a real, attack, not maybe attack, but a setback for not only Donald Trump, but even for Barack Obama. Congress, one committee at least, said that AUMF, that authorization for the use of military force adopted after September 11, is no longer in effect. We're going to talk about that next with Rita Simeon from the Human Rights First organization.
2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17. That's the whole ball game.
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hey friends, it's Bill Press here, and I want to tell you about an exciting new venture that we're embarking on here at the Bill Press Show and ask for your help. First, I don't have to tell you, with Donald Trump in the White House, it's more important than ever to keep strong progressive voices out there on the media every single day. But you know what? It's also harder than ever for a couple of reasons. First, because there are so few progressive radio stations. Second, because station owners just won't put progressive voices on the air. And third, because even YouTube won't allow any ads on on commentary, progressive commentary that's in any way political. I mean, you can't even mention the word war without YouTube pulling that ad revenue. And of course, without those ads, without that revenue, we can't raise the money we need to, pay the rent, to pay salaries, to turn on the lights, and keep those strong progressive shows coming your way every day as we have for the last 12 years. So we've embarked on something new, and we need your help. We've just started putting up all exclusive content on a new platform called Patreon. Now, by becoming a Bill Press Show subscriber for a very low monthly fee, you'll be able to go to Patreon and get exclusive content, newsmaker interviews, political, progressive commentary, political columns that you won't be able to get anywhere else. And pretty soon, you'll be able to enjoy our very special podcast called The Making of Bernie Sanders. And again, it's all on Patreon, Patreon. So please go to Patreon today and sign up, become a subscriber to The Bill Press Show. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we will keep the resistance alive. Together, we will fight back against the destructive policies of Donald Trump, but we can't do it without your help. So please go to Patreon today and sign up. Thank you.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. At work or at play, you're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Oh, hey, she's cute. Nice going, man. Things are going great for you. You've earned a night out. Good drinks, good friends. Yeah, we can go ahead and call this a good night. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Not smart. Yeah, I saw that coming. Say goodbye to her. Ouch, that'll hurt your bank account. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. I hope you like eating frozen dinners. Alone. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Same great show, new great channel. Stream live video at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Here we go now, The Bill Press Show, July 3rd on a Monday. Good to be back with you, and thank you for joining us today as we come out to you live, coast to coast, all part of the Young Turks Network, of course. Looking at you on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Did I get that right?
You got it.
All right. Also on WCPT out in Chicago and on Free Speech TV. Of course, don't forget to check out our podcast, which you can find at BillPressShow.com or any of the, like iTunes. Our podcast every day. You can follow the show, even if you can't catch every bit of the show in the morning. We're coming to you live from our nation's capital. Pretty empty this week, except for those who stayed around for the fireworks tomorrow night. And we're brought to you today by the International Association of Firefighters. All those good men and women of our firefighting departments, we count on them every day. They're on the front lines every day, protecting American families under the leadership of President Harold Schaitberger. We salute them and thank them for their good work. And welcome to the studio, the International Legal Counsel for the Human Rights First organization, Rita Simeon. Rita, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you
Thank
again.
you for coming in. I want to move that microphone over just a little bit there. Now, I have a little postscript from our last half hour.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, Rita, forgive us. You are free or not free to enter this part of the conversation, right? I don't want to put you on the spot, meaning. But
I have no idea where this is going. So.
Okay. But this is my footnote to all what we were saying about Donald Trump, who is showing that he is not fit to be president and demeaning the office of the presidency. And if anybody would trigger the 25th Amendment, I think it's his behavior. But I have to, the footnote is, I know there are a lot of people who say you can't go there because then we'll get Mike Pence. Okay?
Sure.
I want to officially say I've had it with that thinking. I don't want Mike Pence as president, but I would take Mike Pence over the guy that we've got. Because at least Mike Pence will not be demeaning, disgracing the office of the presidency. I would disagree with everything he wanted to do. I, in fact, would have to argue that he would probably be more effective in getting things done than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But I think for the good of the country and the good of the office of the presidency, I'd rather see Mike Pence there than Donald Trump. So.
Hey, let's get them both out.
Well, no. And then, like Maxine Waters told us in our interview, I would say, okay, let's get rid of Trump. And then we'll go after Mike. Then we'll go after Mike Pence.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. But those, I know, and I've talked to a lot of my liberal friends have said, you can't go there, Bill, because we'll get stuck with Mike Pence. I think for the good of the country, we got to say, all right, that's a price we're willing to pay.
That's fair.
That's my little footnote there to what we were just talking about, and we will talk more about that in the days to come. But right now, one of our best friends is Congresswoman Barbara Lee from California, whom I've known a long, long time. She and I used to get in a lot of trouble in the Democratic Party in California, and she was, God bless her, the only member of Congress, Rita, right, to vote against the authorization for the use of military force after September 11. Not that she's a pacifist, but not that she's against all military action. She just thought it was too broad and went too far, correct?
Yeah, I mean, her concern is exactly what we've seen happen over the last 16 years, right? So, she was afraid that the
16 years.
16 years, right? We're in 2017, the last time I checked.
Yeah.
And this authorization was passed right after 9/11, a week after. And Congresswoman Lee was concerned there was no, it's called a sunset date that would put a time limit when Congress would have to come back and revisit the authorities and decide if they were still needed. And she was afraid that it would be used for sort of unforeseen wars. And here we are, 16 years later, fighting in over, so have wars going on in several different countries, military force happening in a dozen countries.
It's been invoked far beyond Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda, right?
Right. So
even by Barack Obama, not just by George Bush.
Exactly. I mean, the authorization that Congress passed, if you look at the text of it, it's only 60 words long. It says, that it gives the president the authority to use necessary and appropriate force, essentially against those who attacked us in 9/11, those who planned the attacks, authorized the attacks, or harbored those who committed the attacks. Which everyone understands this authorization to mean you can go after Al-Qaeda, the ones who attacked us, or the Taliban, who was harboring Al-Qaeda at the time. But this authorization has been used, including, as you mentioned, under President Obama, to go after a whole host of other organizations that they say are associated forces of Al-Qaeda. So they've stretched it to those other groups that are sort of fighting with or affiliates of Al-Qaeda that are
including ISIS, correct?
So ISIS, they never claimed that ISIS was an associated force. What they have said is that ISIS is sort of like an offshoot or a successor entity of Al-Qaeda.
But ISIS did not even exist at the time this was passed, correct?
Exactly. So there's no way that that Congress and voting, the few members that currently sitting members of Congress who were around to vote for this authorization. There's no way that they had ISIS in mind, because ISIS didn't even exist at the time,
right?
Or the conflict in Syria, for that matter.
According to Think Progress, that the AUMF has been used since its initiation. Since its initial use in Afghanistan, to justify at least 37 military operations in 14 countries. So these were like White House lawyers who said, "Nah, we can stretch it here. Yeah, we can stretch it and apply it over here." Almost, it was taken, wasn't it, as sort of a blank check for any president in terms of military operations?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by blank check. I mean, that's to say a blank check goes pretty far. I mean, I don't think that the Obama administration would have said, well, yeah, we can do whatever we want, use military force wherever or against whomever we want. But they did limit it to associated forces of Al-Qaeda, or sort of ISIS as an offshoot. But you can see how even that limit gets you pretty far. And if you don't have geographic limits, other than sort of sovereignty rules that prevent you from, going into whatever state you want to, you end up being in a situation where Congress can't sort of say, oh, no, we didn't mean to authorize a ground war in, 5 different countries or 10 different countries. But if that limit isn't put into the authorization, then it doesn't do any good. Same thing with no time limit. If Congress says, well, I didn't mean to authorize a 16-year war, well, if you didn't put a time limit on there.
Right. So this issue has come up, and I know when we started against ISIS that there were even some Republicans who said, no, we better take another look at this AUMF. And they weren't saying, again, don't do it, but don't rely on this pretty thin reed here as your excuse or your validation or your authorization. So what happened last week?
Yeah, so what happened last week, I think, surprised just about everybody, including Congresswoman Lee herself, which was that the House Appropriations Committee, they're working on the budget, and that Lee, most years, she has some sort of amendment related to trying to grapple with this 2001 AUMF situation, or she's trying to either get it repealed or modified, and or at least, get Congress to debate and vote it. And
it is worth pointing out how much ridicule she got for her opposition to this 16 years ago, right? Like, she was a laughingstock.
No, there were people who wanted her thrown out of
Yeah,
Congress.
people thought this was the craziest thing they had ever seen, and they made her tried to make her look like a loon, that she was the un-American, and now here we are, 16 years later, the tide certainly turned.
So the House Appropriations Committee, and let's point out, was this the full committee at any rate?
So this was the full committee, actually.
Right. And Ken Calvert, whom I know as a good man, a Republican conservative from California, is the chair. So this is a Republican-controlled committee.
Yeah, so it's a Republican-controlled committee. There were a number of members of Congress who got up and spoke in favor of her amendment before the vote, including a number of Republicans, and 2 veterans who got up and spoke. And, let's be clear, there's not a lot of agreement about, on the sort of far left and far right about what a new AUMF should look like and what should be in it.
Yeah.
But what they did agree on is that it's past time to have a debate on this, and that the 2001 AUMF has been just stretched too far for too long. And you're seeing a lot of this agreement on the Senate side, too. There was a hearing just a few weeks ago in the Senate where you saw both sides saying the 2001 really has been stretched too far, and it's time for us to really do our jobs and come together and sort of right-size our armed conflicts. This is not to say, that we shouldn't be fighting ISIS necessarily, but to take stock of where we're at, what should we be doing, why, what's our strategy, and what authorities are needed.
So the Senate hasn't done anything yet, correct?
So they haven't passed anything. What they did was that they held a hearing a few weeks ago to discuss it and to review, in particular, a bipartisan AUMF proposal by Senators Kaine and Flake.
But now, it doesn't this. I can see why the left and the right could come together on this, because the essential issue, it seems to me, here is sovereignty, congressional sovereignty, right, or congressional power.
Right. Exactly.
And not ceding their power to the president. Maybe doesn't it get back to like following the Constitution of the United States?
Well, exactly. So under the Constitution, war powers are shared between the president and the Congress, but it is Congress's job to decide when to go to war.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. When's the last time Congress did that?
Well, so they passed this authorization in 2001 and then also in 2002 to go after the Saddam Hussein regime, which, strangely enough, we were also sort of relying on that for what we're doing in Iraq now, even though it's completely different.
Right. Yeah. And before that, I think it was World War II, right? I mean, Korea, Harry Truman didn't go to Congress.
People disagree over whether Congress authorized the war in Vietnam, for example. So there's different,
Yeah.
Gulf of Tonkin solution.
I
People interpret that differently.
I think that's pretty clear that Congress did not. But at any rate, Gulf of Tonkin was not even at the beginning of the war in Vietnam. Anyhow, that's another debate.
A different debate.
Right. So what happens? This is huge. And you know what? This happened like under the radar, really. Yeah. And for one thing, because people were last week more interested in talking about Morning Joe and that whole flap. And was the White House caught blindsided by this?
I think probably most everyone was, really, honestly. I mean, if you saw Congresswoman Lee's tweet, she said, whoa.
Yeah, I came out of nowhere.
Right, exactly. But I think if you've been following this issue closely, the way that we have at Human Rights First, and you see that this has sort of been brewing for a long time. Senator Flake mentioned in the Senate hearing a few weeks ago that, it's roughly 3/4 of members of Congress that are sitting in Congress now were not around to vote for the 2001 AUMF.
Yeah.
So you've got a
Yeah.
lot of new members who
That's
said,
significant.
I did not authorize what we're
Right.
doing now. And it doesn't mean that they don't agree with what we're doing now, but they
Got it.
want to put
Yeah.
their own stamp on it.
Well, good for them. It's about time that they stood up and said, "Hey, wait a minute. This is the Constitution gives us this power, and we're just not going to cede it automatically to the president under any loosely worded 60-word statement."
Well, you would hope, but I think that there are some members who think, would think that they're doing their job just by passing something that is sort of an open-ended delegation of authority over to the president. And I think that's sort of one of the keys here is making sure that, if Congress really wants to be controlling its part of what it's supposed to under the Constitution, that it can't just be a sort of blank check authorization. It has to be really specific about who force is being authorized against, where, and for how long, and for what purpose.
Well, that gets to the question about what replaces it. So the vote was to have a new AUMF, correct?
So what the vote would do is it would repeal the 2001 authorization after about 8 months, which would give Congress time to pass a new one should they choose to do so.
Do we have that wording yet?
So there have been dozens of proposals out there, some good, some bad, and there are a couple. There's one in the House by Congressman Engel, who's the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, of course, is the Committee of Jurisdiction for new war authorizations. He has a really excellent sort of discussion proposal that's out there that is very clear and specific about who the country would be authorized to fight, that we'd have to comply with international law, that it makes sure that Congress has to weigh in, has a sunset date, et cetera. On the Senate side, the bipartisan Kane-Flake proposal is pretty good. It could be much better. The sunset is 5 years. That's a pretty long time. It has a pretty broad associated forces definition, which you could see could be abused in some of the ways that the 2001 authorization has been abused. So there's some decent proposals out there.
So we have time to work on those, but I want to be sure I understand. The vote to repeal did succeed. It passed the House Appropriations Committee.
So it passed out of committee.
It passed out of committee. All right. What are the chances that Paul Ryan will allow a vote on that on the floor?
Yeah, so I think the chances of this language staying in are pretty small to none, right?
Let's be realistic here.
Yeah, you got to be realistic, and I think there's a genuine fear that we don't want to repeal this without making sure that we have come together to reach agreement. And of course, Congressman Lee has a point, which is 8 months is plenty of time, right? You pass the one after 9/11 within days, with only a couple hours of debate. This is, 8 months is plenty of time to get this done. But on the other hand, you have those who are afraid of, what happens if politically they're not able to do that and this authority lapses, that sort of poses some national security concerns. So, I think because of those concerns, it's probably not going to stay in. But that it doesn't mean that Congress shouldn't still sort of step in and do its job here.
It's a huge step in the right direction, I think. And again, a credit to the doggedness of Barbara Lee, who is just like a dog with a bone, right? She has not let loose of this, and she's persuaded a lot of her fellow colleagues, Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of wake-up call here for people, is that this issue isn't going away. It needs to be dealt with. And, from our perspective, we're a human rights organization, and I think, a number of people it's hard to sort of see what does this war authorization have to do with human rights? And it's really important that Congress get this right, because this is not like going to war with Germany, where we know what that means when we go to war with Germany. We know who their soldiers are. The war is probably not going to last for 20, 30 years. When you're authorizing going to war against a terrorist group, it starts to get really complicated, and there's a risk of eroding really important human rights. Because when you go to war, you can use lethal force in circumstances that you otherwise couldn't. You can detain people in circumstances when you otherwise couldn't outside of war. And so, if you're not careful about how you authorize war against a non-state group like ISIS, you run the risk of authorizing extrajudicial executions and indefinite detention practices that otherwise are considered really to be inconsistent with American values.
So I want to ask you about human rights first. we're talking about this in the whole context of human rights. What is the status today? I have the feeling, with the distance that I have from this issue, that there's not much attention being paid to human rights today, especially on the part of the current administration. I mean, has he ever spoken about human rights? This is a man, I think, who said he wanted to bring back torture.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a real concern, that this administration's lack of focus and attention and pushing on human rights at home and abroad.
Yeah, they say, we talk about it privately, right? But publicly, we're not going to say anything about it. When he invites Duterte from the Philippines to the Oval Office.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's not clear that the administration really understands the significance and the impact that these kinds of meetings and the sort of public-facing statements have on, the ability of other states to commit human rights abuses. And then, as you mentioned, of course, he has talked about using torture again here, and that just, whether he actually does or not. I mean, the law clearly prohibits it, and I think the military very clearly would, say no to such an unlawful order at this point. But just even talking about it changes the image of the United States around the world as sort of this beacon for freedom and human rights.
But the problem is, last time it wasn't the military; it was the CIA that was operating these black holes or whatever they called them, right? These secret prisons where we were.
Right, exactly. But
torturing.
you'll hear even the CIA says we are never going down that road again. We're not doing it.
Yeah. How about Gitmo, for example? President Obama didn't, but he tried. He wanted to shut it down. This administration's policy?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you recall back to the election, even before President Obama was elected, that there's sort of bipartisan agreement that keeping Guantanamo open was not good for our national security. And even McCain wanted to close it down.
Right.
And then you sort of saw that, over the course of the Obama administration, Congress really fought that, and it became this sort of partisan political issue to the detriment of our national security and standing in the world. And now we're in this different situation where this administration, or at least, President Trump has said that he wants to fill it up with some bad dudes. And again, this is really problematic. You've got national security experts, retired generals and admirals, even including the one who was the first commanding general down there to start up the detention process in Guantanamo, saying this is bad for our national security. This is not helping us to be holding people indefinitely, including we've got 5 people down there who are actually approved to be released while Obama was president, and those people are still sitting there.
And we have people sitting in Guantanamo who've been there since the beginning, who still have no charges filed against them.
That's right.
And have had no opportunity to defend themselves or present their case in front of a court of law.
Right, exactly. There's been no trial.
Isn't that the contradiction of everything the United States stands for?
I mean, this sort of gets to the importance of the authorization for use of military force, right? You have to be really careful when you're authorizing war, exactly what it is exactly that you're authorizing. And, does America stand for holding people for an entire generation without charge or trial? I don't think so.
No. I didn't think we did either. Quickly, on the subject of drones, we don't hear that much about. We know vastly expanded under President Obama, which I've been very critical of. Continues under Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's the drone strikes have continued under Donald Trump, and we've seen really sort of frightening uptick in civilian casualties. A number of different explanations have sort of been offered for this, sort of the increased pace of strikes, that they're moving into sort of more densely populated areas. But there's also a lot of concern that the Trump administration has been sort of relaxing some of the standards and policies that were in place under the prior administration that constrained the use of force. And that's really troubling. Our hope is that the administration, as it's considering these changes, is going to make sure that they keep these heightened protections in place.
Well, it's so good you guys are out there fighting the good fight on behalf of all of us.
We're trying.
Thank you so much, Rita. And the organization, check it out and give them your support, is Human Rights First. humanrightsfirst.org. Rita Simeon, thanks so much for coming in.
Absolutely.
This is the Bill Press Show.
You taught him how to hit a baseball.
Just like that. Say hi!
How to hit a receiver. The strike zone. The net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
And here we go on a Monday, July 3rd. Hey, hello, everybody. What do you say? Now we know what Donald Trump does for fun. Yeah, he puts out videos beating up reporters. What a sick human being. It's good to see you. I hope you're enjoying your extended 4th of July weekend, and we thank you for taking time out of all the fun in the sun to join us today. And I'm back with you after a good week off last week, my own fun in the sun up on the beach in Rhode Island. And thanks to Peter Ogburn and Igor Volsky and Sabrina Siddiqui for keeping the good ship alive here and the discussion going while I was out of town. We've got lots to talk about today as we come to you live coast to coast on Free Speech TV, on WCPT out in Chicago, and also on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. The big stories, of course, Donald Trump proving that there is no limits to how low he can go with his latest video beating up on a CNN, what is pretended to be a CNN reporter.
It's so hard to try to explain what the hell is happening.
It's an old worldwide
WWE, right?
WWE, Worldwide Wrestling
Isn't that what
Entertainment.
it is, Jamie?
Yeah, WWE.
Yes.
Right. A clip that they've refocused. Somebody did, and then Donald Trump liked it so much he retweeted it out. Take a look at it. Very disgusting. We've been talking about that. And also the fact that the Republicans had to throw in the towel. You talked a lot about that last week. And now they're talking about, oh, no, we're not going to bother replacing Obamacare. After all, we'll just leave 23 million people without health insurance. We'll just repeal the damn thing and let people scramble on their own. All of that to talk about and more with from the Daily Beast, Andrew Desiderio, right? Desiderio.
Yeah.
Hi, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Andrew, one of those few reporters who's in town on July 3rd. We found out about it. We snagged him here.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in.
No problem.
We'll
It's
get right
dead
to
outside.
the news.
Yeah,
We'll get right to the news of the day.
Yeah.
But first,
This is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of other stories making news. Happy day before Independence Day. A lot of people are out of town, including President of the United States. He begins his day at Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey. It should be noted that this is his 35th day at a golf course as president. That's all I have to say about that story.
all owned by him.
All owned by him. Yes, of course.
Yeah,
all owned by him.
Yeah, right.
This is a big, big, big deal. Last week, Friday, in Minneapolis, the city council voted to pass a $15 per hour minimum wage increase. Now, they're not the first person to make the first city to make that happen, but they are the first city to allow no special allowances for tipped employees. So if you are a waiter or a waitress or someone who relies on tips, you too are guaranteed $15 an hour.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, they're really
yeah.
that's the big fight, right? A tip to
Yeah,
tip or not to
no.
tip, or to include tipped employees into this minimum wage. Sort of the changes that
No,
are happening.
most
around
people
the
don't
country.
realize that there are two different levels.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that works out in Minneapolis. And Tim Hortons. I'm not a Tim Hortons guy. There are people from Canada, and they love Tim Hortons.
I like Tim Hortons. There's a
it's-
couple in Maine since we're close. You know?
It's fine. It's fine. But they've unveiled a new poutine flavored donut.
Sign me up.
For their 150th anniversary.
New what?
Do you know what poutine is? All right.
Really?
Poutine is.
I'm sorry.
It's a Canadian thing. It's a Canadian thing. It's fries
Like curling?
with cheese curds on top and then smothered in gravy. That's poutine.
So good.
That's poutine. I like poutine. I don't know if I want it on a donut. What they have is a honey dip donut, which is their version of a glazed donut, topped with potato wedges, gravy, and cheese curds. You could get these at all of their Canadian stores, but only 5 here in America.
Oh. Man.
None in Maine, by the way. Only Ohio, Michigan.
Bill,
and
we
New
got to
York.
do a taste test, an official taste
No,
test for the
no,
Bill Press Show.
no.
You'd
Okay,
like
all right.
No,
You'd
I
like
would not like poutine.
Wouldn't like a poutine donut.
Just the description of it is disgusting.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Yes, here we go on a Monday, July 3rd. Hello, everybody. Good to be back with you. It is the Bill Press Show, and that's me out for a week last week. But back with you here on the Young Turks Network, coast to coast, looking at you on Free Speech TV. Coming to you live on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, and, of course, joining you out in the Chicago area on the great WCPT. And it's just funny on a day when almost everybody else is talking about Donald Trump's personal attacks and vicious tweets against Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski last week, followed by the tweet over the weekend where he appears to be knocking down and pummeling a CNN reporter that I just saw on Fox News and Fox and Friends this morning. They're Chiron, and they're talking to Kellyanne Conway about the fact that the president's holiday tweets honor the military.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, totally.
I guess, it's all in the eyes of the beholder, whatever it is. On the news and the politics of the day, Andrew Desiderio from the Daily Beast joins us. Andrew, again, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Let's start with the healthcare battle. So, there were several voices, Republican voices over the weekend who said now that we failed last week, we didn't have enough people to repeal and replace. Maybe we should just be talking about repeal and then doing replace maybe later. Here's Ben Sass from Nebraska. Let's not rush into this.
If we can do a combined repeal and replace over the next week, that's great. If we can't, though, then there's no reason to walk away. We should do repeal with a delay. Let's be clear. I don't want to see anybody thrown off the coverage they have now, but I think we should get straight to work at around-the-clock hearings on the replace plan.
Mike Lee from Nevada, right?
Utah,
sorry. Utah, yeah.
Politically, for some reason, we can't get that done. What we ought to do is get back to what I've been suggesting for the last 6 months, which is to push full repeal and then embark on an iterative, step-by-step process to decide what comes next.
So is this really the direction they're going in?
I think this is a lot of the Republican senators starting to realize that it's going to take longer than they thought to bridge those divides between the moderates and the more conservative wing of their party in the Senate. You first heard
they were
this.
supposed to repeal on day one.
They were supposed to, yeah. So they're realizing they need more time and they can't come to an agreement now. So what's been floated now, and Senator Sass is sort of at the front of this. He wrote to the president last week, and the president actually tweeted it. He said, maybe we should just repeal now and replace later. If we can't get a combined repeal and replace right now, what we should do is just repeal the Affordable Care Act. And then another thing Senator Sass said was actually have hearings and talk about this and debate it and talk about it within our caucus.
And
to
meanwhile,
maybe
what happens
later.
to 23 30, however many millions of people who lose their health insurance.
You heard Senator Sass say that he wants to make sure that any sort of repeal and delay would ensure that in the meantime people don't lose their insurance. How you do that, I don't know.
Right. So we're going to repeal it, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? It won't kick in.
I guess it would be symbolic, yeah. Just so that they can go home and say, look, voters, constituents, we promised this to you and we've delivered.
Isn't this like the dog that catches the car, finally? I mean,
it can seem like that a lot of times, right?
I mean, in the sense that, okay, we repealed it. Now what the hell do we do?
Yeah, I mean,
right?
like this has been the Republican calling card for, 7 years now?
I was going to say, what have they been doing for the last 7 years?
They've been calling on their leaders to repeal and replace it, and now that it's time to actually do that, they can't agree on an actual
what I mean,
proposal.
For 7 years,
yep,
they have done nothing to shape any kind of a plan to replace.
Well, what they've shaped is the debate. They've shaped the debate around the country,
right, but they don't
around
have,
this issue of
they
health
do
care.
not have a replacement plan.
As of now, they do not. No, they have something that they agreed to in the House, which passed.
Yeah,
but you have 52 Republicans in the Senate that can't come together. In 2 votes, it's tanked.
Right.
So
it's almost like they have no idea how to lead.
Almost. Yeah. Right. It is exactly.
It's exactly what it is.
Like that. So at this point,
and again, by the way, all the trouble that they've had so far in the House, and now that they're having trouble in the Senate, none of it, not one bit of it, is because of the Democrats. It's all infighting.
Remember, in the House, they have a much bigger majority than they have in the Senate, right? Yeah. So they can afford to lose a lot more votes in the House from either more moderate people or more conservative people, and still, push something through, which is what they did with the AHCA.
Yeah, and even still, it barely happened. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. But yeah, it's worth a point. I mean, Donald Trump keeps saying, the problem is the Democrats are obstructionists and they're obstructing everything. I mean, so far, Democrats might like to be the obstructionists, but I think more of them are willing to work together for some reasonable plan. But that point aside, the Republican strategy in the Senate has been to do this entirely with Republican votes without any Democratic input at all.
Right. So Democrats have been saying we're willing to come to the table to help fix the Affordable Care Act, but what's off the table for them is a repeal. If you take repeal off the table, you lose more than half of the Republican caucus, right? So that actually makes it harder to actually fix the law.
So, Congressman John Yarmouth from Kentucky,
yeah,
a member of the congressional delegation together with Mitch McConnell, who knows Mitch McConnell very well, sat right in that chair last week and told us that he believes, actually, this was a week before last week because I was not here last week, but so before this all came down, he said his belief actually is that Mitch McConnell doesn't care about this health care thing. He'd be willing, he'd be happy if it failed because he wants to move on to tax reform and that his heart is really not into, and maybe that showed in putting this vote off.
I buy part of that argument. I buy the fact that Mitch McConnell wants to move on to tax reform, but I don't buy that he's okay with this failing because he's been talking about this for years and years and years from the Senate floor as both minority leader and majority leader. It would look really, really bad on him on a multitude of levels if they come away from this not, repealing and replacing.
But it did look bad for him last week to have to admit that he couldn't get the vote.
Oh,
right?
For sure. Yeah, he went in front of the cameras, swallowed all of his pride, and basically told everyone we don't have the votes and we need more time.
Well, there is kind of a parallel here with what happened in the House when Paul Ryan had to do the exact same thing.
Exactly.
And
they pulled it and delayed it.
And then he brings it back to life.
Right. Zombie Trump care coming back to life.
Yeah, right. Do you think Mitch McConnell will be able to do the same thing?
Well, I mean, here's what's tough about it. Yesterday on the Sunday shows, you heard like 3 different series of events of where this stands right now. You heard one from Mark Short, the White House legislative director. He said, basically, we're making progress, we're getting there. You heard Senator Rand Paul, who said the opposite. He said, we're at an impasse, we're not getting anywhere. And then the third was what we heard Senator Sass say. So honestly, it's anybody's guess at this point because we're even hearing different, perspectives on where they stand even right now.
I was just checking here. I think it's the front page of the Washington Post this morning.
Today's Post, yeah.
That points out that one person who is kind of not weighed in at all and has not been doing much to help at all is the President of the United States himself, who could be using his bully pulpit to rally votes for this, could be calling people, could be actually maybe engaging himself in the substantive discussion about what should be in it, and that he is not even on the field, not even a player.
I mean, I think his tweets are certainly distracting from that, but another thing that Mark Short said yesterday on one of the Sunday shows was that the president is engaged. He's still making phone calls and doing these things. But
they always say that.
I mean,
and he,
yeah.
He claims that they're making such huge progress, even on the tax reform bill, which, of course, hasn't even been written yet.
And this is the July 4th recess. It's dead here in D.C. There's not much happening, no movement. And we're back in a week. A week from today is when the Senate gets back in town.
By the way, on the Trump and the whole tweets and all that stuff, he just tweeted.
Oh, jeez. I felt my phone vibrate.
I know,
like,
yeah.
What is that?
It's semi-relevant to what we're talking about here. He says, at some point, the fake news will be forced to discuss our great jobs numbers, strong economy, success with ISIS, and the border, and so much else. So essentially,
he's
complaining that we're not talking about other things.
All the great things that he's done.
Yeah.
We could be talking about all of that.
Right.
Jobs numbers. We could be talking about the fight against ISIS. We could be talking about the VA accountability measure that he put.
That little clip from last week. Yeah.
Berate them. And it's just like, if this CNN tweet was just a one-off thing, like, I could see the people going, oh, he's just having fun and what, but like the narrative has already been built.
No, it's an escalation of what he's been doing for years.
No, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Committee to Protect Journalism. What's really frightening here is this is a great organization. It's been around for a long time that I've supported, and most of us in the media support. And their role has been to protect journalists in countries around the world where there is no free press and reporters are actually locked up or executed or kind of whatever. Now their mission has changed to protecting reporters in the United States of America.
Right, and I would argue you can't really compare, the freedom of the press protections that are just so enshrined in our Constitution compared to what you see in other countries, right?
Right.
But certainly when it's under attack like that, you feel like you do have to devote your resources to defending what we already have in this country.
I mean, suddenly they're shifting from like Russia, right? Or I don't know, Uganda or someplace.
Venezuela.
Or Venezuela, And they're talking
really
about
tough
this
conditions
here in the United States, which, is pretty stunning. So the question is, well, first of all, two questions. One, and Brian Stelter made this point on CNN yesterday, why hasn't there been more outrage on the part of members of the media about this or other media organizations?
I mean, something else that Brian Stelter said was maybe it's time for journalists to sort of band together and say, Mr. President, it's not okay to do this. And that's not meant to be sort of in a political way, right?
No,
like, doesn't matter that you're a
exactly.
Republican or a Democrat or whatever. It's to say that these attacks are not something that are, they are beneath the dignity of your office, essentially, right? And I feel like you've seen a lot of that among journalists, but in terms of
not enough
becoming sort of in an activist nature, banding together to confront these challenges, I don't think you've seen that. But in terms of speaking out, I think it's been nearly unanimous among journalists.
Right, but I mean, to me, the big news organization, I mean, I haven't heard the president of CBS or the president of NBC or whatever.
The executive editor of the New York Times, Dean Beckett, said something similar yesterday, so he's one.
And Jeff Zucker did, the president of CNN, but,
it's his network coming directly under attack.
Exactly. No, so expect him to respond, but, I'd just like to see some of these other voices. It will never happen. I'd like to see Fox News stand up and say, no, Mr. President, we're as far from CNN as you can get, but this is not the way you treat journalists or should treat journalists. And then you cover Congress. What's it going to take for these Republicans, particularly in the Senate, to say, okay, enough is enough. We cannot accept this. Now, there were 2 or 3 voices over the weekend who did say this is not presidential, this is not appropriate.
Yeah.
But they were the rare exceptions.
I think they're going to have to compromise with each other, as if they would be compromising with Democrats. You have three main issues. One is the Medicaid phase-out. Number two is the insurance regulations under Obamacare. And number three is possible funding for the opioid crisis, which more moderates like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski definitely want to see in any sort of health care bill. So I think when it comes to especially the Medicare phase-out, you're going to have some sort of compromise whereby the moderates want a 7-year phase-out, and then the conservatives want a more, a sooner phase-out, essentially, right? So you're going to have to compromise there. You're going to have to compromise on the insurance regulations, and you're going to have to maybe compromise over whether there is going to be any funding to combat the opioid crisis. So it's going to be like they're negotiating with Democrats there, but they're really negotiating among their own caucus. And you're going to have people unhappy either way.
And will they ever get to the point where they do what Joe Manchin suggested yesterday, and Chuck Schumer has suggested also, is, you point out, you got to get repeal off the table. But, hey, you want to fix some of these problems, which are legitimate problems, that in some cases premiums are too high. In some cases, there's no availability right now for a public plan option. Or you want to improve Obamacare? It definitely needs it. Yeah, we'll work with you on that. Will they ever get to that point?
If the Democrats come to the table and they say repeal is off the table, Republicans will walk away from the table. They will not take anything.
Republicans will never get to the point where they say our better strategy is just to fix this rather than end it.
I mean, you might have a couple eventually, like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Bill Cassidy, that might come around to that, but it's not going to happen.
Because they've been 7 years talking about repeal for 7 years. They're so into it that they can't get out
And you
of
have
that
millions
rut.
and millions of people who they have promised for 7 years, when we get into power, when Republicans get into power, this is what we're going to do.
And do those people realize that they're going to lose their health insurance because of it?
You'll have to ask them.
This is the thing that I keep saying when we talk about how screwed up the Democrats are, and they are. But like the Republicans, even though they have the White House, the House, and the Senate, they have much bigger problems. I really do think that, because they have no idea what their party stands for anymore.
Something I saw yesterday was that a lot of the front pages around the country in local newspapers, regional newspapers, city newspapers, was you saw on the front pages there was a lot of critical reporting on what the Senate healthcare bill would do to their state, to their city, and how it would affect those people directly. So I would say I think you're seeing really good reporting done, whether it's positive or negative, on how certain localities, certain cities, certain states would be directly affected positively or negatively by this healthcare bill. Because certainly there are states that have been hit harder and not as hard by the Affordable Care Act and the changes that were instituted there. So I think the fact that you're seeing a lot of really good reporting done at the local level is something that's heartening for people, and certainly for people like us in the national media who don't focus on that as much. I think it's important to remember that there is really good reporting being done at the local level, so that average Americans can know how this law will affect them directly.
Yeah, but so when you outline, just like even the Congressional Budget Office did, you outline exactly what this bill would do, who would be impacted, what would happen to them, how some people would pay more, some people would lose their insurance, some people with protection now, particularly with Medicaid, exactly what happened to people on Medicaid, and you outline all those facts, right? That's exactly what the media should be doing.
Yeah.
And you know what we call that? Fake news.
Well, I don't think we would call it that.
No, but I mean
I know.
That's what it would be termed. Fake news, because it's not adulatory. It's not.
Right, and there are a few positive numbers coming out of the CBO that the administration has been highlighting. One of them is the deficit's going to go down, taxes are going to go down, things like that, right? So, it does come back to the normal battle of political framing, how you frame your argument at the national level. So.
Right. So, man. So they come back, what, a week from today?
A week from today, the Senate's back.
This whole thing will play out. Do you even when they come back, it's gonna take some time to get this.
I think we're gonna have to see how this week goes, and whether we get any updates at all on progress. I honestly don't think we're gonna get much of anything. They're all at home. Some of them are away on vacation. A lot of them take this time to go on foreign trips, particularly to the Middle East.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. But we should have been expecting a vote the week they come back next week. But we'll see.
Yeah. It's going to take longer than that, I believe.
Yeah, it's anybody's guess.
All right, Andrew. Fun times for you up over there on the hill.
That's for sure.
Andrew Desiderio, political reporter for the Daily Beast at dailybeast.com, of course. Thanks so much for coming in,
Thanks
Andrew.
for having me.
John Easley joining us next from the Hill, another campaign reporter. Talk about these special elections. Democrats 0-4. That's not good. We'll be right back.
The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
Follow us on Twitter @BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
So they say it's a man's world? Well, I don't see anybody's name on it. While they were out doing their thing, we slowly changed all that. We changed all that. Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Hey, look, it's those guys.
What's up? What's happening today?
Let's do those pearly whites, man.
Yeah! Okay, boys, check it out. Stand up, do my terrorists, don't compare us.
Ooh, cute.
Are you good to try?
I'm fine.
Hey girl, what's the sound? What's the name? What's good? What's up?
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Sir, go and step out of the vehicle for me.
Yes, sir. See ya, buddy. Today, Sean's got a hearing. We'll see how it goes. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
How about it on a Monday, July 3rd? Hey, folks, great to see you. Great to be back with you here on The Bill Press Show. Live from our nation's capital and reaching out to you coast to coast on Free Speech TV, on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, and out in the Chicago area on WCPT, where we're brought to you today by the American Federation of Government Employees, those great men and women who keep our federal agencies working day in and day out, proud to get up and work for America every day under the leadership of President J. David Cox. For more information, check out their website at afge.org. Kind of quiet in Washington, D.C. these days with the House and the Senate and the President, Vice President, so far as I know, all out of town. But, there are a few of us here who just never give up the ship. Day in and day out, we're there to bring you the news of the day. John Easley is one of those, campaign reporter for the great newspaper The Hill, joining us in studio. John, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Is The Hill officially operating today? Are the offices
we're on.
open?
We're on.
Really? You're on it?
Yeah.
That Bob Cusack, he's a slave driver.
Relentless.
He is.
Absolutely relentless. It's unfair.
And he's got the gambling problem, which is really unfortunate.
And the drinking problem. When you combine the two, it's really sad.
No, it's so sad. What's happened to him?
Just tell him we said hello.
I'll tell him we said hello. We'll keep it at that. Yeah.
Give him our best when you get there. Oh, man. Where do we start? Well, we haven't talked about this yet today. So Donald Trump is on the warpath. He claimed famously, right, that he would have won the popular vote as well as the electoral vote if only 3 to 5 million people had not voted illegally for Hillary Clinton. Now he is set to prove that that is exactly the case by appointing a commission to study this issue, huh?
Right. Vice President Pence leading it along with Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, obviously a Trump ally.
We remember him, right? Yeah.
Right. And I guess what the latest development is they put out a request for information to the states for personal information, voter ID information. And we're seeing a backlash from some of these secretaries of state, from some Republicans even. I think the Secretary of State from Mississippi told whoever was requesting the information they could go jump in the Gulf of Mexico. But clearly a backlash. I think there's some suspicion among some of these folks that the White House is out to prove sort of their pre-drawn conclusion that there was massive voter fraud that cost Trump the popular vote. And for a variety of reasons, some privacy-related, obviously, they don't want to fork over the information at this point. So we've got a showdown between the White House and the states.
I mean, that is a gold mine for hackers, right? Like if that was, heaven forbid, that's the way that this goes, that could be really, really bad.
Well, first of all,
and by the way, the Trump Commission is, according to HuffPost, is demanding voter data via an unsecured email. So if that's if that's the server that they're using, it's going to go up on an unsecured email server, and then what?
Well, first of all, the first problem with this is it's a total fraudulent claim, right? No proof at all.
There's been no proof. Yeah.
Second, that this commission is stacked, right, with people who are Donald Trump puts there because he thinks that they will do what he wants and come up with this claim. But the other thing is that voter fraud, voting rights, and everything is the prerogative of the states. Every state sets up its election system differently, not all differently, but the way it wants to. They monitor this stuff. The Secretary of States are responsible for this. This is their jurisdiction. And I think what you're seeing here is some blowback from states saying, no, this is the federal government going too far. We're responsible in our state. We monitor for voter fraud. There have been countless studies or investigations into voter fraud, all of whom have come up basically with a big fat zero.
Well, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of a shame it's become so politicized. I mean, we know that there was Russian meddling in the 2016 election, right?
No, we don't talk about that.
So, I mean, it's, there's certainly a place to ensure that the voting apparatus is secure against this kind of thing. It just, what we've seen the statements coming out from President Trump directly, and it leads one to believe that this is sort of a search to find this pre-drawn conclusion that he's, that this might have cost him the popular vote, rather than maybe take a look at some real vulnerabilities that might exist in the voting system.
It is interesting that the president has not set up a commission to study the Russian hacking into our election system. He has also attacked the one investigation that's underway on possible collusion as a witch hunt, and yet he set up this commission to look for voter fraud here in the United to prove 3 to 5 million people voted illegally here in the United States. Yeah,
I mean, some of the pushback should be expected, I think, from some of the Democrats running the voting apparatuses in these states. But the fact that Republicans are pushing back on some of the privacy issues and this sort of thing, I think, is sort of a red flag. I think.
Yeah. This is a commission that's going nowhere. I would expect that someday it will disband, just quietly disband and disappear, right? And then the White House hopes nobody notices that this commission no longer exists anymore. So you cover campaigns for the Hill on the special elections, congressional elections. At the end of the day, after the last vote in Georgia and Montana, the Democrats ended up with a record of 0-4, right? Was that to be expected, or the Democrats just failed to fight the good fight?
Well, I don't know. They certainly didn't fail to fight the good fight. We saw tens of millions of dollars in some cases pumped into some of these races. I think maybe the expectations might have been a little out of balance with what should have been expected there. I mean, obviously these special races always get more attention. We're told, don't take these as a bellwether or as a prognosticator. And yet there was so much, Democrats were eager to hang one of these victories on the board, and they fell short. I think that's meaningful, but I think also it doesn't necessarily predict what we're going to see in 2018. I mean, it's going to be a completely different political landscape by then. So it's easy to want to read a lot into it, but it's probably best to hold off. But certainly, I think it was a huge disappointment for Democrats that they couldn't at least land one of these, particularly the Georgia House race with John Ossoff. I mean, the polling indicated they were neck and neck. It was if you listen to the talking heads in the media, it was going to be going all night, and it wasn't even really that close. It was a 4-point victory, I think, for Karen Handel. So, disappointment certainly on that end, but also probably not smart to read too much into it about what it means for 2018.
Because each absolutely right, the disappointment and the failure of the Democratic Party, in a sense, to deliver to their promise. Maybe their expectations were too high. But each of these districts opened up because the president chose somebody for the cabinet from a safe Republican,
right?
"Quote unquote,"
smart move,
safe
right.
Republican district. So we're not going to lose anybody. Republicans are going to guaranteed almost to win each of these 4. So this is a safe move. Georgia turned out to be problematic, but they were not prime territory for Democrats.
No, they weren't, or even toss-up districts in a lot of cases. They should have been safely Republican, and Republicans held on to them. I mean, I do think that probably Democrats overestimated what they believed would be Trump's drag on some of these candidates. I mean, we haven't seen any evidence that that's the case right now. I mean, as much as the frenzy that you hear inside Washington about right. Trump's approval rating being so low, and just I guess the erratic nature of his behavior in some cases is going to doom some of these candidates. We haven't seen that in these red districts yet. We haven't seen Trump supporters abandon him yet. And I think that's probably something Democrats should keep in mind as we head into 2018. It's not going to be, maybe just a clean sweep like you're expecting just because we hear how bad Trump is inside Washington every
Well,
day.
he's not the only politician that people do consider now to be kind of perhaps a millstone around their neck. There's also New Jersey. With Chris Christie, who before this weekend was already considered a political liability in coming up in the governor's race when his lieutenant governor, I forget her name.
I'm drawing a blank too, but
okay.
The internet maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
But Peter can check real quickly. So his lieutenant governor is running, and I talked with some friends from New Jersey over the weekend about how can she distance herself from Chris Christie and everybody.
Guadagno, by the
What's
way.
that?
Kim Guadagno.
Kim Guadagno.
Yeah.
That she can't because she's his lieutenant governor. As if it were not bad enough for Chris Christie, then this weekend, we talked about this just a little bit earlier, but in case you missed it. So Chris Christie, in a snit with the legislature, has shut down state government, right? This is the way he's going out with a blaze of glory, including shutting down all state parks, and which included this one great big beautiful beach where the governor happened to have a house as governor. It's not his personal one, I guess, the governor's. So the beach is shut down to the public as well as all state parks over the weekend. But, of course, Chris Christie shows up with his family at his beach house and goes out on the beach with this crowd. The only people on the entire stretch of beaches, nobody there. Miles. But the Christie family. And Chris Christie insists, Peter, do you still have that? Here he is. Yeah, here's the quote. When he's asked about it, how is it that nobody else is able to go to the beach on 4th of July weekend, but you can? He says, quote, "That's just the way it goes. Run for governor, and you can have a residence there." And then he added, "I didn't get any sun today." And one of the local papers in New Jersey, I forget which, it doesn't say here which one it is, but they hired a plane and they flew over the beach.
Right.
And they got a great aerial shot of Chris Christie sitting there like a beached whale in his beach chair, soaking in the sun. Chris Christie says, "I didn't get any sun today." And later, a staffer had to come out and say, he didn't get any sun. He had a baseball hat on. Oh, how bad can it get?
Technicality.
Yeah.
I think probably the lowest approval rating for a sitting governor right now in all of the country.
Well, whatever it was, it just went down again.
It just just astounding. It doesn't seem like he cares.
The front page of the New Jersey papers this morning are absolutely brutal because they just show him sitting out on the beach.
That photo of him
and
sitting there.
Chris Christie lounges on a beach that he closed to everybody else. And he just doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it.
Or he's at the point where he doesn't give a damn.
Right.
Because
how far has he fallen to? He's a top-notch politician at one point, a real presidential contender.
He was the hope of the Republican Party at one point.
Right. And you even saw in some of those debates, he's a solid communicator and a fierce fighter, and you could see the political talent there, but it's just spiraled.
I thought in 2012, Chris Christie, if he had run, he would have been the Republican nominee, and he would have given Barack Obama a real run for his money.
Yeah.
And that was his high point almost, right?
It was all downhill from there.
They have a window, and I think that was his window, and he missed it. Yeah.
It really does show how quickly things move, right? Because he, I think, was banking on the fact that people would remember him, would want him around in 2016, and they just didn't. He made a splash in the debates, but he was never a serious competitor in the primaries.
He wasn't.
Not even a little bit.
Right. The only impact he really had was ending things for Marco Rubio in the one debate, the malfunctioning robot debate. Yeah.
So how low can you go not to get a job from Donald Trump? After he sucked up to Donald Trump so much, he was the chief, right after the election, the chief spokesperson for Donald Trump. He was on Morning Joe every morning and the other shows praising Donald Trump. He was head of his transition for a brief moment, right? Mm-hmm. And then he just gets totally locked out.
And there's so much just cloak and dagger and just pathos involved in working for Trump. You're right. He was leading the transition effort. We've heard differing stories about why that might have come to an end, whether it's a feud with Jared Kushner
was not
over
real
his
fond
father.
of him, we understand, right? Yeah.
I've heard from folks that Christie didn't necessarily think that Trump would win and didn't have the whole transition process set up, so they were starting from scratch on day one. Just a whole range of reasons, but certainly we saw Christie become a key ally for Trump during the campaign, stand by him, and in some regards be humiliated publicly on some of these things. There was just video of him, appearing with Trump at a rally, and then Trump asking him to leave. You hear about snide remarks, made about Christie. So, some indications that working for Trump isn't always necessarily very pleasant and won't necessarily give you the rewards that you think that you might be getting down the road.
So, if we know how things may go in New Jersey, what's your take on Virginia, where there's also very important governor's race this year? Ed Gillespie up against Ralph Latham?
Ralph Northam.
Northam,
right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Right. It's hard to say. I think this might be another one where it's just it's going to get a lot of money, a lot of attention, obviously, for being so close to Washington, but maybe not another one we don't want to read too closely into, particularly being a governor's race. But obviously there's such a dearth of political races this year, it's going to be viewed as another referendum on Trump and how both parties, I guess, are performing in the age of Trump. It is interesting, though. We did hear the Georgia race being cast as a referendum on Trump, and then as soon as the Republican won, we don't hear that too much anymore. So I think it might be another one we don't want to get ahead of. But yeah, one of the last major political races of 2017. It's probably going to attract a lot of money and a lot of oxygen, especially inside Washington.
Well, if there is a Mr. Republican establishment, it's Ed Gillespie.
Right.
Former White House aide, former top Republican lobbyist, former head of the DNC, head of one of the Republican national conventions, has always been. He's the ultimate kind of Washington insider, and in terms of the Republican Party, whether he was a never Trumper, I don't know, but he's the exact opposite kind of Republican from a Donald Trump. How does he deal with Trump in the White House? I'm sure there are pockets of Virginia we know that are solid Trump.
Right. No, totally. I mean, that's
but
sort of
not Northern Virginia, where the votes
are. Not Northern Virginia, no. Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the big question for all of these candidates running. Are you a Trump Republican? Are you going to try to separate yourself from him and risk sort of losing out on the energy that Trump undoubtedly brings out of his base? And these folks show up, and they showed up in 2016. I mean, it's a political calculation for every last one of them, and it'll be interesting to see what this establishment Republican this close to Washington, how he's going to run his campaign. I mean, imagine he'll run it like other establishment Republicans and sort of talk out against Trump when it's convenient for him, but also try to court the base in some way. But that's just a fine line to walk for a lot of these candidates.
Right. What every candidate is being asked today, or every elected official, particularly Republicans, are being asked today. It's back to the old question that we have asked ourselves so many times: how low can you go? Right. During the campaign, we kept asking this: how low can you go? When Donald Trump said, "I could walk out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and my base would still love it."
Right.
How low could you go? When the Access Hollywood tape comes out, how low could you go? And then we thought this was all going to change when he's president. It didn't change. He's up to the same old tweet tricks, if not worse than ever. How low could you? Last week it was Mika Brzezinski, low IQ, bleeding from her facelift, and this week it's the CNN beat up, right? With this mock CNN figure. Is there any point? Is there any point that low enough that Republicans, particularly in Congress, are going to say, no, this is it. We can't support this guy any longer.
Right. I mean, we saw Republicans speaking out against the Mika Brzezinski.
Yeah, a couple
tweet.
of them.
Yeah, a few of them.
But I mean, I have to say, they did speak out against it. And they said, "Well, we're discouraged. This is beneath the office of the presidency." But they said that same stuff about Barack Obama when he wore a tan suit. That this is not on the level of the American presidency. So to put it in those same terms, I think is a little silly.
What they don't say is we're not going to support him any longer. Yeah,
right.
And too many get into this. It wasn't a member of Congress, but Melania saying, well, if you hit him, he's going to hit you back. Mm-hmm. Or Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, people knew that they were electing a fighter when they got Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, these Republicans were legitimately abandoning Trump during the Access Hollywood tape, and yet, but there was back. No. Then he won, right? I mean, it's like I don't know that they know how to react to these things. You don't know which ones are gonna have legs and which ones are going to fizzle out. I mean, there's controversies like this, I'm sure, that we've long forgotten that might have just happened a month ago or something.
Right,
I don't even...
It's like a lifetime ago.
Right. So you just don't know which ones are going to stick, which ones are serious, which ones are not. And I mean, I think the bottom line is the frustration for them is that it's all they get asked about by reporters when they're going about their business on Capitol Hill. When Trump tweets about Mika Brzezinski, when Trump tweets body slamming CNN, that's what when you show up for work, that's what you're going to get asked about. I know there's a level of frustration there. I think that's why you see a lot of them becoming frustrated with this. But, as to cutting ties with the president completely over one of these things. Yeah, we haven't seen that happen yet. I don't know that there is a benefit to Republicans doing that. And also, they have their own agendas. They have a small window here where they have the House, the Senate, and the White House. They can get things done. I think they still want to take advantage of that, and cutting the president loose is not the way to do that.
No, bingo. I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, maybe I'm being very naive. I do think that Paul Ryan is not happy with Trump's language and his incendiary tweets and all that, but he wants to get his bill signed. Same thing with Mitch McConnell. I mean, Mitch McConnell's been around a long time. He doesn't use that kind of language. He doesn't. But Mitch McConnell wants to get his tax reform bill signed. He wants to get his health care bill signed.
Right.
And so they really are willing to accept almost anything in terms of discussing personal behavior on the part of this president, because they know that Trump will sign basically anything he puts in front of them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that,
don't you think?
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, I think that
which is I find really offensive, but that's the way it is.
I mean, I think it would have been it'd be a little bit different had Democrats won one of those special elections. I think it would have sent Republicans into a blind panic. But it just
why would they stop now? I mean, they haven't lost anything since
right.
the election.
No, that's
right.
a very good point. That would have been like maybe a warning shot across their bow.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, until there's electoral consequences, I don't know that we will see them.
Those electoral consequences then not coming in the special elections will have to come in 2018. All right. So that's your business. What's your prognostication? Despite losing those four specials, do Democrats still have a shot at getting control of the House back in 2018?
I mean,
they need 25 seats, right?
Right. I mean, the caveat being that everything that we know about the polls and political prognostications have been so wildly off this last cycle that you're almost certain to wind up with egg on your face. What we do know is that the party in power tends to lose seats in a midterm election, right? I mean, I guess recent history indicates Republicans are more eager to show up in these midterm elections than Democrats, but certainly with the energy that we see when these Republicans go home like they are right now and are going to face protesters
usually
over
the
health care and this kind
party
of thing.
in power in the first midterms loses 10 or 12 seats.
We should expect Democrats to pick up some seats. Whether it's enough to pick up the House, I mean, that would be big. The Senate is a coin flip at this point, but I think Democratic expectations are going to be even higher than they were in 2016, and the disappointment possibly even greater if they can't at least pick up the House. I mean, if they can't pick up the House, I mean, it's gonna the sort of the soul searching and the state of the Democratic Party being in disrepair. These stories are just gonna, I think, just grow in intensity because there's every expectation among Democrats that Trump is a failing president with this historically low approval rating, and they should be able to capitalize on it. And if they can't, there's something fundamentally wrong with the party. So, I mean, myself and I think most political prognosticators expect them to make gains in the House, if not pick up the House. So it's going to be on them to recruit the right candidates and make the right investments to do that.
If Democrats can't win the House back with Donald Trump in the White House,
get used to 8 years of Donald Trump.
Time for another party.
Yeah.
All right, John Easley, on that point, enjoy the rest of your 4th of July weekend. Thanks so much for coming in today, all right?
Thanks for having me.
And hello to all of our good friends over at The Hill.
Yep.
Have a great day, folks. We won't be here tomorrow. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Bill Press Show.